Hello, everyone. My name is Festus Akimbusoye, and I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. And this is the recorded accountability meeting that I hold with the Chief Constable on a regular basis. And for your own information, this is in addition to the regular catch-up the Chief Constable and I have from time to time every week. Perhaps I will ask the Chief Constable to introduce himself for those who do not know who he is yet.
Hi, everybody. Trevor Rodenhurst, Chief Constable of Bedfordshire.
And just get started, just to make it clear to everyone, these questions that I'll be asking are largely from correspondence that I've had with members of the public, and also some that are born out of the performance board meetings, which are led by the Chief Executive in my office, as well as senior officers from Bedfordshire Police. So some of the questions here are derived from that meeting and some from the public as well. And I guess the best place to start would be following the very tragic murder in Luton a few days ago, Trevor. Now, I'm sure you will join me in expressing my deepest condolences to the family of the young man who sadly lost his life. And but it would be really good to get an update from you on what Bedfordshire Police is doing to reassure the communities and how the investigation is going as well, without going into any specific details of a live investigation, Trevor.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to convey my heartfelt sympathies to the family who've lost the young boy. The young boy has lost his life. And I say that not just as a Chief Constable, but as a father of two children who go to school in the county myself. And there are obviously other families affected. What I won't be able to do on this call, Festus, as I'm sure you'll understand, is go into any detail of a live investigation at this very early stage. But what I would say about reassurance in terms of the investigation is we have our major crime team on this. There is every resource, specialism involved in this. And, I am confident that that is making good progress, and we've got specialist staff officers working with families. In terms of, I will perhaps move into, the challenge of knife crime and convey some thoughts on that, although there are a lot of conversations going on in different fora this week. In terms of, reassurance to the community here and now, they will be seeing, additional resources out and about, and in the areas, there will be some additional resources in the areas of our schools. This won't be done in an intrusive way that causes fear or alarm, but we're doing that cooperatively with schools to provide visible policing at all, appropriate points. And, what I would say is, knife crime's a real challenge, and we need to get to the point where we're tackling the causes. However, here and now, there will be a very robust response to anyone who chooses to carry a knife. So Festus, that will be treated as a serious crime, anyone found with a knife, and I've engaged personally with the head of CPS for our region in that. That clearly is tackling the symptom of this situation, rather than, the kind of the causes. And clearly knife crime is a challenge. It's a challenge in many areas nationally. We only need to look at local news, even today, to see that in other places. But this is, our concern right here, right now, is in Bedfordshire. There have been a number of engagements, meetings, and obviously there are people dedicated from both policing, the local authority, schools, and others who are coming together daily to look at the response to what happened on Friday. But also what's coming out of that is a determination to do more in relation to preventing the causes of knife crime, and there is no single agency that will crack that on its own. It's a combined effort. What I would say is there has been a lot of work ongoing in the county, and one capability I would call out, which is not a policing unit, is the violence exploitation reduction unit. That is a team of highly professional people from various backgrounds with lived life experience and expertise, that is available in Bedfordshire to work with young people in a way that can divert them away from going down this path, wherever they are on that journey, and has done so successfully. So there are certainly instances I believe have been prevented by that, and they will take referrals from any agency, as you know. So I would highlight the important work they do, but clearly, nevertheless, we've still had this. We had what happened on Friday, and what there is certainly a willingness to do more by all partners in this, and certainly I've been involved in conversations with various colleagues and members of the community across the county this week, where there is certainly, a willingness and commitment to that. So, and I would just call out one particular event that I was invited to this week was with all the head teachers in Luton, and this isn't just exclusively for Luton in terms of the problem. We wanted anything that we want to do across the county, but this was in Luton on Friday, and what I heard in that room was commitment of leadership, of curriculum time, of resource, to come together to do more, because again, this is no single agency, but the schools themselves have a very important role because they have the opportunity. Where we have young people, and clearly there's a young person's voice in this as well as other members of the community that needs to, so that those conversations are ongoing, and I say with some degree of confidence, I think there'll be an additional coming together and an effort and a plan to do more in terms of preventing knife crime. But this is everyone's in this, and certainly policing needs to own its space, and we will do that, Festus. But we need schools, parents, local authority, and the police to come together on this, to do more. But certainly there will be a enhanced policing presence in places where we think it should be, to not just reassure the community, but to be vigilant around the threat that is a real one of knife crime. And all I would say to Festus, I've perhaps spoken for quite a long time on this, as you understand why. I would say to any young person who's thinking of carrying a knife today, if you do that, you're more likely to be a victim of knife crime yourself, and that is much more likely, or come into contact with the criminal justice system and can have life changing consequences of that as well. So I really appeal to people to kind of be vigilant around, and if you suspect someone of doing this, you don't necessarily have to tell the police. You can tell people like the Veru, or a teacher, or whoever is the responsible person, and that will trigger an intervention that will be able to do something about that.
Thanks for that, Trevor. It looks like this is not recording, believe it or not. It keeps saying I need to contact the admin, but one second.
If I look at my computer, it's saying a recording was started by you.
But on my side, it's saying it is not. And
that the
does it show the red
light is on?
So you've got the red light on your side?
Yeah.
And on my end, on my side, okay, fine. Should we just continue then? Because I just know that there are probably 2 or 3 people who watched this and might be a bit disappointed that it's not been recorded, but we shall proceed. If you're showing this recording on your side, that's fine. Okay, brilliant. And then the next question. So following the conviction of the murderer of Sarah Albone, and the recommendation by the judge for Bedfordshire Police to review its actions, what steps has Bedfordshire Police taken to learn from this tragic incident? So for those who do not know, this is the case of a lady that was brutally murdered by a partner, I believe, in Biggleswade.
That's right.
Absolutely horrific incident. And during the judgment being pronounced by the judge, the suggestion was made that Bedfordshire Police should review its actions in relation to what it knew, what it could have done to prevent this domestic murder. So what steps are the force taken in that regard in response to that suggestion, a recommendation, by the way, Trevor?
Yeah, again, firstly, this was a horrific, brutal murder that we're talking about, which has been well publicised in the press. We continue to support Sarah's family and have done so since the commencement of this investigation. And again, an opportunity to convey my thoughts to Sarah's family. A domestic homicide review is ongoing, and that's always triggered in instances of this nature. Clearly, Festus, a domestic homicide is is triggered by the Community Safety Partnership in an instance of this nature. It's chaired by an independent chair with expertise, is usually the author of a report that comes out at the end. Sometimes that can take some time because it normally waits for the conclusion of criminal justice process, but that's ongoing. However, in order for that process to take place and to support the investigation, we clearly provide all of the information known to us as an agency of our involvement in this, of any involvement with this from the very first contact point with Sarah, the individual who's been convicted, on this. And so in providing that information and going through that in any case, there are some obvious recommendations for ourselves effectively. And, and I don't want to prejudge, we don't prejudge what the domestic homicide review will say, but nevertheless, what we don't do is wait months and months to then act on stuff that we think is an obvious point of learning or process change or scrutiny for ourselves. So there are a number of things that came out of that case that have instigated action and changes to guidance, etc., that's come out as a result of the case. Again, I don't want to talk about them before the domestic homicide review is published, but I guess I would summarize them in the assessment of the risk that was identified at the outset of this and the rationale behind that. The attention to detail and completion of a number of actions that was instigated before this was declared a murder investigation, and indeed, how can I put it, the investigative mindset of officers who first attended what was a missing persons report, in those early stages. There are other things, but I would kind of summarize them now, but clearly we will come back. And what we do is we have a board that tracks through all of these types of actions, and it's so that we can make sure that saying learning is going to happen isn't just a statement, it's action that can be owned and tracked. And so that's ongoing as we speak.
And so if there was one of our residents right now who is either being stalked by someone who is being threatened by a partner, or all the kind of incidents that was found to have been in play in the build up to this brutal, tragic murder of Sarah, what confidence do you have that Bedfordshire Police is taking this seriously and this person is being supported and attended to in the way that they should be? What level of confidence do you have in that regard?
We assess the risk, the threat of every call, and all of the things you just said there all trigger concerning risk, and that will be picked up when it first comes into our control room, and therefore that triggers supervisory scrutiny of those things that get put in place. So I see that happening, Festus, every day in cases, because there is daily risk of those types of that you mentioned that come into the force, and they are managed well. However, if anyone's experience isn't that, and in these circumstances, and they feel that's not the case, then they need to come back to us, and they need to flag it that they don't feel safe, and that they need that to be reviewed, because we will do that.
Okay. So you've kind of answered the second question here, which is around you explaining how the domestic homicide review works. You kind of touched about what process kicks in. So who's normally part of the, you talked about the CSP. For those who don't know, that's the Community Safety Partnership, which is led by each local authority. So we have 3 in Bedfordshire for the 3 local authorities. So who else do you know is part of the domestic homicide review apart from the local authority and the police?
Yeah, so they trigger the review in consultation with their local partners, and then they appoint an independent chair, and there are independent chairs with the qualifications, background and experience that we can go to make sure we get someone with the right expertise and someone that's independent and experienced, often, in this case, in domestic abuse type arena. And they will then undertake that review, and there's an individual management report provided for each key agency involved, and we have a review team for these in our major crime team.
Right. Okay. The next question is from a dad in Flitwick who informed me that residents in Flitwick have raised concerns with Bedfordshire Police about a group of young men, some young boys mainly, some with knives, chasing and physically assaulting their children in the town. One informed me and reported to the police that their son was very badly beaten, but for the help of a bystander and a security guard who stopped these youngsters from causing further harm to his children, to his son. Another mentioned that this group of lads came to the football center in Flitwick while their son was at football training, and they were looking for him, apparently. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this situation. I think we've discussed this before. I know there have been some arrests, I believe, made, but I'm not sure if it's in regard to this particular case. Can you please update what the force is doing on this issue, as well as any actions being taken so far, if there have been any arrests, or if this is an issue, a case that you're aware of yourself?
Yeah, so I am aware of this, Festus, and to be fair to you, you raised it with me outside, personally before. We just spoke at the outset about the seriousness of knife crime.
Yeah.
And there's an undertone of knife crime risk here. So due to the level of serious youth violence that was experienced in this case, this particular series of incidents was raised at the Force Tactical Tasking Group and adopted as a force priority. So there is an operational response in place. I won't go into the detail of what that is, because actually it's an enforcement operation.
Right.
There have been an arrest so far, and there may have been more, but I'm don't have the latest update in relation to that here and now. But there will be a robust response based on all the risks you've just described. What I'd like to do is just say, to thank those members of the public that you mentioned that intervened in a public spirited way. Clearly themselves, may have had a big influence on this. And also there is a You know, there is a forum in the county, a multi-agency gang panel meeting, again, which is scrutinised, you know, this as well, because it's relevant for that meeting. So there is work ongoing. Hopefully people in Flitwick feel some reassurance by that, but actually, you know, I ask for their vigilance, because if they see continuance or other activity of this nature that concerns them, then that will feed into the operation, but we need to know about it.
So I mean, I probably will just catch up with the parents and just, you know, just see, just get some feedback from them in terms of how they feel things are going. I mean, I've not heard back recently, so I suspect things have died down, which is reassuring, but I don't want to take that for granted. But as a follow-on to that question, Trevor, one thing that they also mentioned is that as far as these parents are concerned, that these children, these young people were coming from, I won't name the location that they suspect, but they come into Flitwick via the train station, jumping over the barriers, and then coming to cause havoc in the town. Is there much work between Bedfordshire Police and British Transport Police, or maybe even the Network Row, whoever runs the train station, in terms of monitoring access to and fro and through the train station?
I mean, we work really closely with British Transport Police because of the number of stations that we have. Obviously, they have their own resourcing challenges, and that being, you know, and they police the railway. That doesn't stop us if we've got an operation running, going into, you know, we've got our powers, and clearly that's an important location for what we've just been talking about. But yeah, we do work with British Transport Police, and you know, as you know, that presents us lots of opportunities because of CCTV and other things to help us identify people involved. So, you know, that, and we are aware of that as part of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. This an interesting question, but so a councillor on the police and crime panel wrote to me a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that the Bedfordshire Police needed to invest money in having its own helicopter to deal with the issue of criminality in the county and in his area. And this was in response to the reports of a helicopter having been used in the seizing of motorbikes being used in a part of the county. And I informed him of this success story, given that was one of the issues that he raised with me repeatedly. And in his view, the force should, well, I should pay and you should agree to buy a helicopter for Bedfordshire Police own use, and that would be a good use of money. What is your response to this councillor, who's not a police officer, by the way, as far as I'm aware, or never have been?
Well, you know, if money was no object, I'd love our own helicopter, but it is, you know, we're talking many millions of pounds to buy, run, maintain, and, you know, and crew a helicopter. You know, if I had many more millions of pounds, they'd actually be diverted to some other things before we got to buying a new helicopter. That being said, we have this is, you know, the 43 force system that exists in England and Wales, you know, provides local accountability and local prioritization of effort and partnership working. There's many good things that come out of that, but this is where policing comes together nationally, because it doesn't make a good use of public money for every force to have a helicopter that might not be required for a certain day, but nevertheless paid for and crewed, etc. But actually, you know, through the MPAS service that we contribute towards, there's a fleet of 19 helicopters and 4 fixed-wings aircraft across 15 bases in England and Wales. I've been down to our the base that predominantly services us. I've flown to Bedfordshire from that base. You're there in 15 minutes, you know, flying time, and sometimes they're there sooner because they might be in the air nearby. And we get a good service from the helicopter, and indeed, it was involved in policing operation on Friday evening in Luton and other operations, as you mentioned. So with the current funding for policing, this is the best way to deliver that capability. If there was unlimited resources, it would be a different conversation. But if there were even enough to buy a helicopter, I'd actually be making the operational case to put that funding into other things first. So that's, hopefully that's a comprehensive answer to that, Commissioner.
No, that's very fine. And I've been to see some of those offices as well. Obviously you have to have the hangar, the maintenance space, and all of that for the aircraft. And as it happened, while I was there, a job did come in, and it was in Leighton Buzzard. And within 15-20 minutes, we were there. I could see the officers on the cameras in the helicopters tracking a group of individuals on what was suspected to be a stolen motorbike from the train station. They were part of a county lines, and they were guiding the ground officers in tracking the location of these individuals, and they were caught and arrested. So yeah, I agree with you. And personally, at a time when we need more officers on the ground, patrolling our communities, dealing with serious organized crime, dealing with rapes, investigating crimes, personally, I think taxpayers' money would better spent, having more officers on the ground than having one or two in the air in a helicopter. But there you go. But that hopefully the council has got an answer to his question now. Can I have an update on the force control room, please, and answering times?
Yeah, you might have to bear with me while I look at the latest
Sure.
times, but I will talk while I try and multitask and look at live time recorded time. So the control room, essentially, that we put significant effort into it because we were not answering, the calls into our control room as quickly as I would have liked us to have done, as we should have done to give the service to the public we want to. That was purely on the basis of exceptional demand coming into the control room. What I would say is, and I'm hoping I can get some times up, but I'm waiting for the computer's whirring wheel to give me the answer, so we might have to come back to that. But call times have continued to improve, Commissioner, month on month since the start of the year, and have come down significantly both for 999 and 101s. However, I still want them to be better. They aren't as good as I'd like every day, but we've got more staff in there than we've had for a long time. And, there is an incredibly positive mood in that room in terms of officers and staff working together. It's predominantly staff, but as you know, we've got police officers in there as well. We're currently putting more police officers in and taking some out who've done a good stint in there, but some of the people that have gone in there have asked to stay, which is a good thing because that keeps some experience as well as upskilling others. And we've got a new intake of people coming in next month. I can't give you the exact number of that because that's subject to vetting and different things that are still being worked through, but nevertheless a new intake of people. And we've had a number of intakes throughout the year, which is significantly bolstered resources. However, there is a lag between someone joining that room and then sitting, being in a classroom, sitting alongside someone, and then effectively being let loose and contributing to the providing the response we wanted to the public. We've spoken here before about some of the things we're doing when public seem to ring us because they're not sure who else to ring for certain things, and when we speak to them, we realise they need the council and those sorts of things. So
what is demand looking like at the moment? Do you have that information?
Well, I'm trying to bring you up the accurate figures, but demand has remained high but sort of stable throughout. You know, we had a couple of months where it was absolutely exceptional, but it's still high, but not at those levels. I just don't have in front of me now, Commissioner,
Okay. No, that's
the
fine.
latest data. I might get it whilst we're still on this session. If I don't, I'll have it sent through, and you
No
can
worries.
you can publish it on your own channels.
Right, that's fine. I'm just mindful that there was a time when we did hit nearly 15,000 in 1 month,
Yeah,
which is quite extraordinary given that 2 years ago we were averaging about 10,000 a
yeah.
month. Okay. So well, it'll be good to see how, by the way, for how much longer do you expect to keep having the officers in the FCR, or is that going to be a rotating basis among different teams ongoing?
It's going to be a rotating basis.
Okay.
Until such point where we've, you know, if we are suddenly not requiring it because we answer, you know, we provide the service we aspire to provide to the public in terms of speed of answer and the quality that, you know, of the response to what happens in the control room to every call on each day. You know, if we've suddenly reached that and we're able to do that with all of the police staff that we have, then, you know, we will have take a different view with, you know, we could do with those police officers being deployed on the streets. However, at the moment, we're not in that space, and they're making a really valuable contribution to that room, and therefore we've had to spread our resource to be able to both respond to the public quickly, but also you know, answer the phone quickly as part of that response.
Right. Which kind of leads nicely to the next question, which it's really good. I'm going to actually link this into two questions that I've linked. These two questions that I have already. Obviously, recruitment and retention were some of the key commitments we agreed for the policing crime plan. And I'm really pleased that we now have the highest number of officers on record in Bedfordshire. It's 1456 or 1457. I can't remember which one now, but 1456, 1456. Can you just provide us with an update on where we are in terms of numbers, and more critically though around retention, because obviously that's going to be a real key if we as residents want to see the positive impact of all these officers over the next 12 months or so. How are we doing it? How is the force doing in terms of retaining more of its officers?
Yeah, so you know, this is a success story as far as I'm concerned. To achieve our uplift of officers as part of the 20,000 officer increase Bedfordshire's share, we needed to get to 1,436. We more than achieved that, and as a result of other places struggling to do that, there was an offer to some forces to go beyond that with some funding to do that. So we aspired to get to 1,457, and we actually, by the end of September, we actually got to 1,456. So, you know, 20 more than what our uplift target was, and only one short of what we were aspiring to do by that point in the year, for which we've received extra funding. And as agreed with you, we said by the end of this financial year, we'd want to be at 1,466.
How realistic is that, do you think?
Well, that's what we intended to be at 1,457 by the end of September at 1,456. So my view is we're on track, and you know, a lot of people say, well, that's not much of an increase. But as you say, there is a turnover, and that turnover is for a number of reasons, including when people joined the service many years ago, kind of giving, you know, sort of waves of retirements and things. However, if I look at turnover, and while we've been talking, I've managed to get those figures in front of me. So the turnover rate as of the beginning of September for us was 9.6%. So last year we were at 10.3, and pre-COVID we're at 11.3. So whilst I'd like it to be lower than 9.6, it continues to go down. since before
Right.
COVID, since last year. And that is against a trend nationally where that figure's going up.
So we're seeing retention rates nationally falling on average, and then we're seeing it going the opposite direction.
Yeah,
in
that being
Bedfordshire.
said, I want to be transparent. We are above the national average currently, but those two figures are going towards each other. So,
Right.
you know, I think some of the things that we've put in place here, we're now starting to see the impact of that on retention. And clearly that is a great thing because, you know, if we can improve retention, then we don't have to recruit as many new people, and then the less new people you have in the system therefore means you have more who are at the stage where they are, you know, fully operationally effective.
It'll be interesting to see how it will be interesting how much money we're saving taxpayers for every percentage change in.
Yeah, we
Sorry,
might have to get someone who's a bit better at maths than me to do
oh yeah,
that. But
let's
I know
call
a
it, let's
man
call
that
it Phil
is.
Wells.
So you know, which is good because, you know, our numbers of students that we have in the early stages of their training peaked at the beginning of in the spring, and now that's starting to come down. So the way I describe it with my workforce who do need people to be coming onto their teams permanently is, you know, we were at the peak of that mountain and now we're going down that mountain in terms of, you know, having more people that are then able to be independent and working across patrol, crime and public protection.
Yeah. And so, do you then have any indication as to how many of those new recruits are now becoming more fully independent, more independent? What they're now independent, basically. Do we know?
Yeah, so I think the numbers I have in my head are as of the end of or the beginning of last month. So just a few weeks out of date, but it's a fairly good indicator. So I think around May, June time, we had about 414 students. At the end of August, beginning of September, we had 329. And of those, 119 were still in their initial training or tutorship.
Of the 329?
Yeah. So of the rest,
Okay.
the other 210, they are actually, although they're in the early part of their service, they're independent and working across those areas, which is an improving picture.
That is very good. And of course, I would imagine one of the areas where we're seeing the biggest improvement in retention would be amongst our cohort of students, because that's where we used to see the biggest attrition.
Yeah, we will always see people who join the service for all the right reasons and it just isn't for them.
Yeah.
But the bit that we focused on is anyone who joins the service and their experience wasn't as good as it should be, and therefore they chose to leave. And that's the bit we're changing through, you know, a focus on the culture of the organisation, the, you know, particularly the student hub and how that nurtures people so that they don't go out onto teams until they're ready to do so. And the sort of the support and care they get from colleagues and their supervisors.
Okay. Moving on to the HMICFRS now. So that's the His Majesty's Inspectorates of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Service, for those who want to know. They're like the Ofsted of policing. And at their recent reports into Bedfordshire Police, the force was rated as outstanding in how well it managed the most persistent offenders. And the force was marked as pretty good overall in some key areas, which are marked improvements from previous assessments. So clearly the force is moving in the right direction, and it was one of the best performing forces overall when you look at all the aggregates in place, especially that outstanding report as well. But there were a number of areas that it was identified that the force needed to do better in. Can you just give an update on what the force is doing to improve in those areas, and perhaps also touch on some of the changes that we now know will be coming in terms of the HMICFRS's inspection regime?
Yeah, okay. So we, you say the recent report, obviously it isn't that long ago we had that, albeit that cycle comes around, and we're already in the kind of
New one.
Collection of information phase of the next one, which then in the new year we'll have inspectors come into the force, and about this time next year I anticipate we'll have our next report. And I do know that in terms of the approach, there has been more of a focus now on outcomes, performance outcomes to the public. So that will, if you like, you won't be comparing the same things, and I guess that's for the HMIC FRS to explain that in due course, and maybe I can help with that as we get nearer that point. However, in the last report is the one we work with, and that, in my view, rightly highlighted that we need to improve in our investigation of crime, and that very much focused on the supervision of crime and responding to the public. In terms of responding to the public, Festus, that's largely what we've been talking about earlier in terms of our force control room. So, not exclusively, because there's always processes and things you can do to change it, but that is about resources in that room. And we've spoken a lot about that over months of how we are, growing the resource in there. However, I would highlight now that if you engage with us on a web chat, the response you get is instantaneous, because you initially speak to a chatbot that very quickly either takes you to where you want to go or puts you through to a person. And we also have a DigiDesk in there, which is pushing information out to the public that might help inform them whether they need to tell us about something. And so that's ongoing. We've got single online home now, where it's making it easier to report and track crimes, etc. So there are things in there which all complement that, but it was a big factor was a resourcing issue that we talked about. And then in the investigation of crime, so we've got regular auditing across crime, public protection, intelligence, and patrol, because patrol carry a workload of crime. We dip sample that, the investigations, to ensure compliance, and we have a force detective capability board, which works towards standardizing the supervisors' reviews of investigations, and looking at how well we do our victim codes of practice, compliance, etc. And lots of work's completed around this, including mandated briefing sessions, CPD videos across these teams. Again, whilst lots is being done, those teams are at the end of the pipeline to get the new resources as they come through the system. And because of our young workforce, there is a lag into those areas. So they still are stretched in terms of some resourcing, albeit they do a remarkable job. And for most things that they do, they're in the right, I'm not a great believer in league tables, but there is strong performance, for considering we've got some resourcing challenges. But the individuals in there, if any of them are listening to this, I want them to know it's an improving picture.
Right.
A slowly improving picture in terms of resources, but it continues to go in the right direction from here on in.
Good. And can you just touch briefly on the changes that HMIC-FRS are looking to bring in terms of the way they're going to be inspecting forces, and how this could create? I mean, I've already had some conversation with some of my colleagues who are quite concerned about this. Of course, you want to have targeted, robust inspection regime, but if the goalposts are changed, it's important for the public to know that what is being measured this time is different to what was being measured the previous time. So what might be an improvement or regression is not actually comparing like for like entirely.
Yeah, there's certainly a shift from, if you like, the building blocks and hallmarks of a good force to one that focuses on outcomes, as I understand it. But I guess rightly the public want to know in terms of outcomes, and I understand that. I guess I want the force to be improving on the right trajectory, improving outcomes, but also if you like, not focused on particular outcomes where you you aim for a target and that delivers some kind of perverse activity, such as criminalizing young people in a way that's not necessary. And I'm not suggesting that in any way that's what's intended by any change to the regime. But that's not anything that, it's not something, that's not an approach we'll be adopting because we focus on a particular outcome to try and get a good mark. We are looking at improving the service we provide to the public in all areas that we should be improving that service. And that's about doing the right thing, for our officers, and not trying to achieve a particular, tick box type outcome. And I'm not, again, I don't suggest that's what's intended, because they're looking at, how well ultimately how many crimes we do solve and all those things, which are important things to assess.
Yes. And that's what the public would expect as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So just moving on to a slightly different issue now, more locally. Again, still, we've discussed this before in terms of car meets. There was one that was brought to my attention, I think, in Biggleswade, where, and obviously another one in Luton as well, some of the car parks there. And they just want many people want to know what the force wants to do or can do about this issue. So yeah, this reckless and dangerous use of vehicles. Again, just an ongoing issue. I'm not sure if you've had any case come to your attention recently about these car meets and what the force is doing about it, and more importantly, what can the public expect the force to do about it if they call in about this gang group of people with their vehicles meeting and driving recklessly and speeding from point to point.
Yeah, and we've spoke. I'll come on to directly this issue because I get written to about it quite a lot, and so there are obviously genuine concerns about this. Again, this conversation today demonstrates the breadth of the mission, because we're talking about the real serious threat of knife crime across the county earlier, and how resources are being focused on that, and now we're in a conversation about effectively the kind of antisocial use of vehicles. I am aware of these. I think the ones I was made aware of more recently was in the kind of Linmere area of Houghton Regis, where we've seen this, and I know from talking to that team, there's a local priority there. They police every car meet that we become aware of. We've got Joint Protective Services roads policing teams which are tasked to the fast roads and are supporting this. And we have had, the last event that did pop up was successfully moved out of the area and disrupted. We've reached an agreement between developers and Central Beds Council over early adoption of some roads, because there's a lot of development going on over there. So they're now looking that developers can look at implementing traffic calming measures earlier, and they're linked into our designing out crime officers to kind of look at the best spots to focus on that. So there's some really good partnership that's coming out to kind of design some of this out. And we're currently supporting some bespoke public space protection orders. So we need to know about these things, because if we don't have the justification to use those sorts of powers if people don't call it in. But so we're looking at those orders, because that would give us a much wider range of powers to move these individuals on. And at the moment, I think we're looking at this, we are looking at Houghton Regis and Constable, because there's more information currently that exists of this happening over there. But if members of the public do see these car meets, I would encourage us to let them know, because if there's antisocial behaviour, then we can, inspector can authorise a Section 34 anti-social behaviour crime and policing act order that means that PCs and PCSOs can direct persons away from that area if they think they're going to have committed or are likely to commit antisocial behaviour, and ask them not to return. There's also options, other powers under the Police Reform Act, if a vehicle's being used in a careless and inconsiderate way. So we've got some powers that can be used. We will use them in Bedfordshire, and I've got examples of them being used in the areas I've said recently.
So those have been used in someone like in Houghton Regis recently. Okay, all right. Actually linking to that, I've got two more questions. Can you provide some clarification as to the force policy in terms of pursuits, especially in cases where someone is using a motor vehicle, a motorbike, and they don't have a helmet on? Because there is this perception that the police won't do anything, and the criminals know this, so they ride around on a moped or a motorbike of some kind, and they don't have a helmet on, so they know the police won't pursue them. And of course, you probably know that Andrew Selous raised a question about this in Parliament not long ago, and then he received a response from the policing minister saying that something has been done in the Met to tackle this issue. And he says that the Bedfordshire Police has the same power and it needs to be used. So can you just clarify once and for all what the force's position is on this? Because just so you know, Trevor, some of your officers have been telling councillors that they can't do anything because they've been told not to. So it seems somewhat unclear as to what the policy is, hence the question.
Yeah, it's not about policy, it's about assessing the risk. And I heard that some of my officers have said that, and a clear message has been passed to help them understand what our position is. I won't go into the detail of the tactics we specifically do and don't use. What I would say is pursuits are, they're inherently dangerous. That is a fact, either in cars or motorbikes, but we still undertake them. And motorbikes present their own challenges due to the size and agility, and but we do pursue them in certain circumstances, and any pursuit will be managed by the Force Control Room Inspector, who looks at what they've been involved in, the seriousness of the offence, and all other factors like, well, where's it happening, and those kinds of things, and looks at what tactical options we can use to bring it to a safe conclusion. And it's the control room inspector who decides whether a pursuit is or isn't authorised. There's nothing to prevent local officers implementing what we call a compliance stop, because we have got powers to stop vehicles. Obviously, if there's a failure to stop at that point, then there's an offence committed. Stolen motorbikes, sometimes used in crime, they're more likely to be pursued in those circumstances. And if they're, when they're used in ASB, we can normally trace them through identifying marks, registrations, and gather evidence of that. And we will be, just because we might not have done an intervention there, it doesn't mean that that's not captured on body-worn video. Offences haven't been committed, and we won't pursue people thereafter. And I'm also looking at some other methods that have been trialed elsewhere that in some cases can mean that we can, for example, put a mark onto somebody that doesn't come off in those circumstances. So and again, if we've got the details of the vehicle, we can require anyone to tell us who's using it, and if they don't, they commit an offence themselves. So there's lots of things available to us. I've spoken to Andrew myself, Festus, on this very issue, and actually we put some enhanced resources in place in some areas where there's been evidence that there seems to be a prevalence of those kind of problems.
And thanks for that, for your intervention on that one. I'm sure he will be very appreciative of it. I just think that it would be worthwhile for these individuals to know that in Bedfordshire, a zero tolerance approach is being taken to this kind of antisocial use of vehicles or motorized vehicles, for that matter. And I think it's only a matter of time by the time you seize a couple, which I have seen reports of them being seized actually. Hopefully the message gets around. The last question I want to ask you, Trevor, is about the code of ethics in policing. On thankfully or unfortunately, we've seen another case of a police officer being sacked for having an inappropriate relationship with a female victim of crime in Bedfordshire. So I thank you for being robust in your position in taking action on this. The College of Policing has recently updated its code of ethics. I just want to know what the force is doing to embed the code of ethics, how this is being measured, and what steps are being taken to ensure that residents of Bedfordshire can have full faith and confidence in our police officers and police staff.
Okay, as ever, you're kind of one step ahead of the game there, because the new code of ethics is about to be launched. We discussed it at Chiefs Council last week. So that's going to be made up of kind of two parts: ethical policing principles, which fall into kind of public service, courage and respect and empathy, and then also the guidance for ethical and professional behaviour in policing. I guess that will replace the current code of ethics, but certainly this will be an improvement, because I think what will happen is it will separate the professional standards of behaviour, which ultimately, if you fail to meet them, you're immediately into conduct territory, and ethical principles, which seeks to promote the highest standards of behaviour and policing. And it, two separate things, so that one is promoting really good behaviours and the other is an absolute standard, of which if there's a failure to uphold that, then so we will. The college has done a lot of work on this. There's lots of material to help forces launch this, embed it, and use it as a platform to engage with their workforce in a way that is creates real good thinking on this and good understanding, and we'll take full advantage of that, because my priority here is the culture of the organisation, the nature of the policing we provide to the public, and this goes to the heart of that. In the meantime, irrespective of that, the standard is the standard, and anyone who falls below it, as you've seen by the example you gave, there won't be a place for them in Bedfordshire Police. That's different than saying, you would draw a distinction between someone making a mistake and those kinds of things, because that happens all the way through. But when it comes to those standards of professional behaviour, there is a standard, and the example you used, there is no room for that in policing. And I'll continue to take that approach, and they'll be consistent with that, and therefore everyone who works for Bedfordshire Police knows what that standard is.
And that is very reassuring, and I want to thank you on behalf of our residents for being very, very big on this issue, because if there is no confidence in the ethics and standards of police officers, then we have nothing. We have nothing. And that has got to be the starting point. And I want to just thank you for making that one of your key priorities. Just to finish off on a lighter note, Chief, for the average person who might be watching this, what is it like being a chief? What is it like being a chief constable? What do they do anyway? Apart from spend all their time listening to annoying police and crime commissioners. So what is your day looking like, Chief? For the person who doesn't know what you do.
Well, certainly this week and the weekend weren't quite as planned, because every day in policing is different, and it doesn't matter if you're a chief or someone who's going to be on the streets tonight. We respond in many instances to what's happening. I guess for me it's an absolute privilege to be a chief constable, because Bedfordshire is a special place. This is a great force with people doing fantastic stuff every day, and they need leadership and support. We've got some great leaders in the organisation, and we're this week in particular has meant that you know, those leaders are out there engaging with partners and public over some very tricky issues. You know, but in terms of, you know, my days and weeks, it's interesting because one minute you're having a meeting about some really serious issues affecting the community, the community, and the next moment you're looking at, you know, what we're going to look like in a year, 2 year, 3 years time, and I'm about to go and spend a real valuable couple of hours now with some staff involved in some really serious investigations to understand, you know, what it is that's great about their work, but also what's making it maybe a bit harder than it needs to be, and what I can do to improve how they go about their daily, you know, role of investigating serious crime and protecting the public. So it's a real privilege to do that. But nevertheless, you know, by all the things we've discussed today, you know, it presents its own challenges for sure.
Yeah, and thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing Bedfordshire as the place you want to work. And on behalf of the people of Bedfordshire, I want to thank you and your officers and staff for the tremendous job that you do. You have a very difficult job, and I think most people will not understand or know, and thankfully will never get to see the sort of things that you get to see. And I've just looked at some of the news reports from the force website of, you know, gruesome murders and attacks and things like that. And what people don't tend to see is that a police officer had to be the first on the scene to see some of those things. And once they've seen those things, they can't unsee it. And I'm just grateful for your men and women and what they do. And I'm always going to be here to support you and your team and your officers in supporting us. So, Chief, thank you very much, and do thank your colleagues for us when you get the time.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.